It's an honor to be nominated for this award, especially as a writer who grew up in Ottawa. So I want to thank my English teachers from here, from Dunlop, Alta Vista, Ridgemont High, and Carleton University. A special thank you to my publisher, ECW Press, for producing this beautiful book. A thank you as well to my family back in Victoria for putting up with my many absences during my research trips. And a huge thank you to my parents who are here tonight and who always supported my dream of becoming an author, no matter where it took me. Now I'd like to read from Chasing Utopia. When people ask why, at the age of 20, I dropped out of university to live on a commune in Israel, I reply, look at my wrist. There you can read a faded map of my past, a thin white scar that runs as straight as the Jordan River. It's all that remains, aside from the odd arthritic pang, what I like to call my old college football injury. Which is true to a point. Fact, I fractured my right wrist in a scrimmage during my first semester of university. A little macho deflating context, I'd been playing touch football in the snow with journalism students. Still, that bad break meant deferred exams and months in a cast, and after the tiny bone refused to heal, a screw and a graft. More time in a cast nixed plans to join my hometown high school sweetheart on a tree planting contract in northern Alberta. She promised she would be only gone for a month and vowed to write every day. This was the summer of 1988, a more innocent and disconnected era. Pre-satellite phone, pre-email, pre-Facebook and Skype. Our relationship would live or die on the wings of Canada Post. I worked a temp job filing accident reports for the city's transportation department. At home, I taught my left hand to type soppy love letters to a remote P.O. box in the boreal forest. I kept mailing these letters, even when the replies diminished and then stopped. I considered pulling a Lancelot, stealing my parents' Malibu Classic, and driving across the continent to win her back. My friends talked me down from that fantasy. Dude, they told me, get over her. It wasn't so easy. I had a broken heart, an aching wrist, and enough money for tuition or transatlantic plane fare. I chose door number 1 and bought an open ticket to Tel Aviv. Why Israel? A friend had backpacked around the Mediterranean and told me about something called a kibbutz. What's that? I'd asked. A kibbutz, I learned, was a cooperative farming village where backpackers could swap manual labor in fields or factories for room and board. Israel had hundreds of kibbutzes, from the grassy foothills of Mount Hermon to the desert valley that led to the Red Sea. Many had established the borders of what would become, in 1948, the Jewish state. Kibbutzes could be as small as 80 members or as large as 2,000. They ran collective economies, often described as the purest form of communism in the Western world, uncorrupted by the police state bureaucracies that ruled Russia, China, and Cuba. Every year, thousands of young travelers pass through the gates of the frontier farms and live together briefly and intensely as volunteers. I'd never been political, though, and if all I'd wanted was a rural sabbatical, my prairie uncles could have put me to work on their wheat farm. The kibbutz, however, promised an exotic land filled with history, adventure, and camaraderie, far from my own romantic failings. And it was a chance to live, however briefly, like a true utopian. My friends threw a going-away party, or rather they invited me to drop by the same parent-free townhouse where every Friday night for the past 3 years we gathered in the basement to shotgun 6 packs of beer, watch a VHS bootleg of The Breakfast Club, and renew the great Ali Sheedy versus Molly Ringwald debate that had paralyzed a generation. As the evening grew hazier, a high school acquaintance interrogated my motives for dropping out of school to live in Israel. "Why are you throwing away your life?" he shouted, inches from my face. "For a girl." I passed around an address book for postcards I knew I would never write. Days later, in the airport departure zone, an Israeli security agent from El Al Airlines scattered the contents of my backpack across a steel table. My mother had sewn a red maple leaf into the top corner of the pack. The fabric talisman was meant to confer diplomatic immunity upon all young Canadians abroad. mostly by proving you weren't American. Now on public display, the net worth of my newly transient life ranged from the pretentious, a paperback copy of James Joyce's Ulysses, to the pathetic, long bandoliers of Trojan condoms. Hope, amongst other things, sprang eternal. But the agent's suspicion was piqued by my address book. He pointed to an open page. Who is Masood Falsometer? I blanked. I'd never heard the name. What was it doing in my book? Then I recognized the handwriting. Under the letter F, a friend had scribbled an Arabic-sounding pen name. I explained to the skeptical agent that honestly I didn't know Mr. Falsometer, that no, he hadn't given me any packages to transport, that in fact he probably didn't exist, that the person who had entered the address was a Kyle from Quebec, not a Masood from the Middle East. The name was a gag. Falsometer, get it, a joke at my expense. The agent's glare darkened. What kind of joke is that? Thank you.